What if I told you the most dangerous scenes in old Hollywood didn't happen on movie sets, but behind locked doors? The same men praised as perfect husbands and romantic icons often lived double lives filled with rage, control, and fear. Studios sold fantasy, while real women paid the price in silence. Bruises were hidden, voices were ignored, and careers mattered more than safety. This isn't rumor or shock bait. It's the ugly truth Hollywood worked hard to bury. Tonight, the spotlight turns away from glamour and exposes something far darker. These are old Hollywood stars whose violence stayed hidden for decades. 20. Gary Cooper. Gary Cooper was Hollywood's quiet hero. On screen, you saw a calm man of few words, strong morals, and gentle authority. That image made him one of America's most trusted stars. But behind closed doors, the reality was far darker. Biographers and close friends described a man who was emotionally cold, deeply controlling, and sometimes physically aggressive toward his wife, Rocky Cooper. Their marriage appeared stable in public, yet it was marked by fear, distance, and silent tension at home. Cooper's fame afforded him protection, and studios worked diligently to maintain his image's spotless reputation. Rocky endured years of emotional pressure, while Hollywood sold Gary as the perfect gentleman, hiding the damage happening inside their marriage. Before we move on, take a second to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. These hidden Hollywood stories deserve to be told, and you won't want to miss what comes next. 19. Douglas Fairbanks Sr. Douglas Fairbanks Sr. helped create Hollywood's first true fairy tales. He smiled widely, leaped across rooftops, and sold the image of a joyful, fearless hero. Behind that athletic charm, his marriage to Mary Pickford told a colder story. Biographers describe emotional cruelty, neglect, and deep intimidation that slowly broke trust inside their home. Fairbanks ruled the relationship with ego and control, while Pickford struggled in silence to protect both her marriage and her career. Physical violence was rarely public, but emotional damage was constant and lasting. Studios protected the golden couple at all costs, turning private suffering into a polished fantasy. The man who played eternal youth on screen left lasting emotional scars on the woman closest to him. 18. Franchot Tone. Franchot Tone was admired for his intelligence, charm, and serious dramatic roles. He looked calm and refined, the kind of man audiences trusted. But his marriage to Lana Turner exposed a far more volatile side. Turner later described violent behavior, emotional instability, and frightening outbursts that made their home unsafe. Tone struggled with jealousy, control, and insecurity, which often turned into aggression behind closed doors. The studio system downplayed the abuse, framing their breakup as personal incompatibility instead of survival. While Tone kept working, Turner carried the emotional damage quietly. His polished public image hid a relationship defined by fear, confusion, and violence that Hollywood preferred to forget. 17. Victor Mature. Victor Mature was sold as a powerful, masculine leading man, famous for his strength and commanding presence. That same force followed him home. Police reports and studio records revealed violent domestic incidents involving his wife, incidents carefully buried to protect his career. Mature had a reputation for explosive anger, and when that anger surfaced privately, it became dangerous. His wife endured intimidation and physical aggression while the studios shielded him from consequences. Hollywood kept casting him as noble heroes, while real harm stayed hidden in silence. The contrast between his strong on-screen image and his abusive private behavior exposed how easily violence was ignored when profits were involved. 16. Orson Welles. Orson Welles was celebrated as a genius, a visionary who reshaped cinema. His brilliance often excused his behavior. Behind closed doors, Welles was known for a violent temper, emotional intimidation, and controlling behavior toward his partners. Biographical accounts describe sudden rages, verbal aggression, and fear that filled his relationships. His power and reputation made it difficult for those around him to speak openly. Studios and critics focused on his talent, not the harm he caused at home. Wells remained admired as a creative force, while the women in his life absorbed the emotional damage quietly, pushed aside by the myth of genius. 15. Artie Shaw. Artie Shaw was a musical genius, admired for his intelligence and sensitivity. Yet his personal life told a harsher story. Multiple wives described marriages filled with emotional instability, control, and abuse. Shaw's moods shifted quickly, turning affection into coldness and anger without warning. He demanded obedience and used intellect as a weapon, leaving partners feeling small and trapped. Physical violence was not always visible, but emotional harm was constant. Hollywood romanticized his troubled nature as artistic depth, ignoring the damage it caused in his marriages. Behind the smooth music was a man whose relationships were defined by fear, pressure, and lasting emotional wounds. 14. Tyrone Power. Tyrone Power was one of Hollywood's most adored heartthrobs, known for his gentle looks and romantic roles. Fans believed he was kind, soft-spoken, and devoted at home. Reality told a different story. Divorce records and private letters revealed a man who struggled with control, jealousy, and physical aggression toward his wives. Power demanded obedience and reacted harshly when his authority was challenged. His charm faded behind closed doors, replaced by anger and intimidation. Studios protected his image fiercely, presenting him as the perfect romantic hero while silencing damaging details. Emotional and physical harm suffered inside his marriages was hidden beneath carefully crafted publicity and glossy magazine covers. 13. Clark Gable. Clark Settle was Hollywood's ultimate leading man, confident, masculine, and irresistibly charming. On screen, he played dominant lovers that audiences adored. Off-screen, that dominance often crossed into control and intimidation. Biographers documented patterns of emotional pressure and physical aggression toward his wives. Gable expected loyalty and silence, and when challenged, his temper surfaced. His fame made confrontation nearly impossible for the women in his life. Studios protected him as their most valuable star, burying marital conflicts and reshaping narratives. The man who sold himself as the king of romance ruled his private world through fear, leaving lasting emotional damage hidden behind his famous smile. 12. Mickey Rooney. Mickey Rooney's cheerful image masked one of Hollywood's darkest personal histories. Behind the energetic performances was a man repeatedly accused of severe domestic violence. Multiple wives, including Ava Gardner and Judy Garland, later described terrifying physical abuse, financial control, and emotional torment. Rooney's rages were unpredictable, fueled by insecurity and addiction. He monitored movements, isolated partners, and used violence to maintain power. Studios continued casting him while ignoring the destruction at home. His public image as a lovable entertainer stood in painful contrast to the fear experienced by the women who lived with him, many of whom carried trauma long after leaving him. 11. James Mason. James Mason appeared calm, intellectual, and refined, often portraying composed villains and dignified men. That same control defined his private cruelty. His wife, Pamela Mason, later revealed years of calculated psychological abuse. Mason rarely shouted or struck. Instead, he used intellect, silence, and manipulation to dominate and belittle. Every word was chosen to weaken confidence and enforce dependence. Because there were no visible bruises, the abuse remained invisible to outsiders. Hollywood praised his intelligence and depth while ignoring the emotional destruction inside his marriage. Mason's cruelty was quiet, precise, and devastating, proving abuse does not always announce itself loudly. 10. Robert Mitchum. Robert Mitchum was marketed as the cool, dangerous rebel, a man who lived by his own rules. That reputation followed him home. Arrests, bar fights, and alcohol-fueled violence were well known within the industry. His marriage to Dorothy Mitchum was marked by volatile arguments, physical aggression, and long periods of silence. Mitchum's drinking triggered explosive behavior that studios quietly managed rather than confronted. His bad boy image was treated as a charm, not a warning. While audiences admired his toughness, his wife absorbed the real cost privately. Hollywood sold rebellion while domestic harm remained hidden behind carefully controlled publicity. 9. George Sanders. George Sanders built his career playing sharp, elegant men with biting wit. That same cruelty followed him into his marriages. Wives, including Zsa Zsa Gabor, later described relentless verbal attacks, humiliation, and psychological punishment. Sanders rarely needed physical violence. His words did the damage. He mocked, belittled, and publicly embarrassed his partners, slowly stripping away confidence and emotional safety. Intelligence became his weapon, used to dominate and control. Because bruises were not visible, the abuse was easy to ignore in that era. Hollywood dismissed his behavior as sarcasm or personality, protecting his image as a sophisticated star. Behind the polished voice was a household ruled by fear, emotional isolation, and silent suffering. 8. Desi Arnaz. Desi Arnaz was loved as America's perfect television husband, smiling beside Lucille Ball every week. Off-camera, their marriage was filled with chaos. Heavy drinking, explosive anger, and constant infidelity turned their home into a place of fear. Lucille Ball endured violent arguments, property damage, and emotional instability that left her exhausted and trapped. Business ties and public image kept her silent longer than she wanted. Studios protected the illusion of the ideal couple while ignoring the damage happening privately. Arnaz's charm covered rage and unpredictability that destroyed trust. The laughter audiences loved was built on a marriage quietly breaking under pressure and emotional violence. 7. John Barrymore. John Barrymore came from Hollywood royalty, praised as one of the greatest actors of his time. As fame faded, addiction took over. Alcohol-fueled violent outbursts, destruction of property, and terrifying rage inside his marriages. Elaine Barry later spoke of fear, emotional trauma, and uncontrollable behavior that made daily life unstable. Barrymore's decline became increasingly public, yet studios still tried to hide the worst of it. His brilliance could not mask the damage caused by addiction and violence. The once respected legend became a source of chaos at home, leaving emotional scars that outlived his performances and shattered the myth of the untouchable star. 6. Frank Sinatra. Frank Sinatra sang about love, heartbreak, and devotion, becoming one of the most romantic voices in history. Privately, his temper was explosive. Marriages were marked by shouting, intimidation, and violent confrontations. His relationship with Ava Gardner was especially volatile, involving police incidents quietly handled to avoid scandal. Sinatra's anger was fueled by jealousy, insecurity, and power. Studios, industry allies, and personal connections shielded him from consequences. While fans heard tenderness in his voice, women close to him experienced fear and emotional harm. The contrast between the crooner image and private violence revealed how easily fame excused dangerous behavior. 5. Errol Flynn. Errol Flynn was Hollywood's ultimate adventurer, swinging swords and rescuing damsels on screen. At home, many women needed rescuing from him. His marriages were filled with alcohol abuse, intimidation, and physical aggression. Flynn's violent behavior toward wives was well known privately, yet consistently covered up by studios. Legal troubles, including serious criminal charges, did little to slow his career. His charm and reckless image were marketed as fantasy, while real harm stayed hidden. The heroic roles collapsed under reality, exposing a man whose private life was ruled by excess, anger, and abuse that Hollywood chose to ignore. 4. Spencer Tracy. Spencer Tracy was praised as a serious actor who played men with strong morals and quiet wisdom. That image hid a painful private life. Tracy struggled with severe alcoholism, and when he drank, his temper turned explosive. His marriage to Louise Tracy was marked by fear, emotional abuse, and long periods of separation. He used intimidation and anger to control situations, leaving lasting emotional damage. Studios protected him carefully, hiding his addiction and behavior to preserve his respected image. While the public saw dignity and authority, his home life was filled with tension and instability. The gap between his screen persona and private actions showed how deeply Hollywood buried uncomfortable truths. 3. Rex Harrison. Rex Harrison appeared sophisticated, cultured, and charming, the picture of a perfect gentleman. Behind that smooth exterior was a pattern of cruelty. Across several marriages, Harrison was accused of emotional abuse, control, and psychological manipulation. He humiliated partners, demanded obedience, and stripped confidence through cold, calculated behavior. His affair with Carol Landis ended tragically, followed by disturbing conduct that shocked those close to them. Harrison's abuse was rarely physical, making it easier for Hollywood to ignore. Studios continued selling him as refined and romantic. The polite accent and tailored suits masked a man whose relationships were built on fear, domination, and quiet emotional destruction. 2. Bing Crosby. Bing Crosby was America's favorite father figure, known for warmth, faith, and wholesome charm. That image shattered years later. His son, Gary Crosby, revealed a home ruled by fear, violent discipline, and emotional terror. Crosby used physical punishment and intimidation to control his children, while his wife, Dixie Lee, remained silent and vulnerable. Studios protected Crosby fiercely, preserving his clean image at all costs. The contrast between the gentle voice of holiday songs and the harsh reality inside his home was shocking. The long-term trauma carried by his children exposed how deeply Hollywood myths could hide abuse happening in plain sight. 1. Wallace Beery. Wallace Beery built a career playing lovable tough guys, men audiences trusted despite their rough edges. Privately, he was accused of severe physical abuse. Actress Gloria Swanson later revealed disturbing details from their marriage, including violent assaults and claims of abuse that caused deep physical and emotional harm. For decades, her voice was ignored. Studios invested heavily in Beery's image and buried the allegations to protect profits. He continued working while the damage remained hidden. The gap between his friendly screen presence and the pain experienced at home exposed one of Hollywood's darkest protections, where power mattered more than truth or safety. So now you've seen the side of old Hollywood they never wanted you to know. The glamour, the charm, the perfect love stories all fade once you realize what was happening when the cameras stopped rolling. These weren't just shocking moments from the past. They were real lives, real pain, and real stories that were covered up for decades. If this video made you see classic Hollywood differently, don't just scroll away. Hit like to help this story reach more people. Subscribe if you want more hidden truths, forgotten scandals, and the real history behind famous faces. And share this video with someone who still believes the Golden Age was all sparkle and romance. Now here's the real question. Once you know the truth, can you ever watch those old movies the same way again?